We obtained this 3-page report from the Houston Health Department, and one of the biggest issues, inspectors found thawed seafood, crab and shrimp to be exact, in bags labeled "Keep Frozen." That led to the temporary closure of Mama Tina's Gumbo shop. This investigation started when a customer reported the Gumbo made her sick, allegedly telling the health department she had nausea and chills and even vomited blood. When inspectors visited the Gumbo shop serving up Beyoncé's mother's recipe, they found several issues.
This situation involving Beyoncé's mom started off as online chaos, but now it's clearly shifting into something people are starting to take much more seriously. And let's be honest for a moment. When something is connected to Beyoncé, people don't always question it the same way. There's already a built-in level of trust, and many show up expecting quality without even thinking twice. If you want more breakdowns like this and updates on stories people are really talking about, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. So now, people are choosing to speak up only after the rodeo, saying Tina's Gumbo may not have met proper standards. That timing immediately raises questions. Because why wasn't this being discussed before or during the event? This situation opens up a bigger conversation about food safety, especially at large public events. When food is served to big crowds, people expect everything to be handled properly behind the scenes, from preparation to storage to consistency. And that's where things start to shift. Because in a setting like this, it's not just about how the food tastes, it's about whether everything was done the right way from start to finish. So now the questions are different. Were the proper standards followed? Was everything handled correctly? And why are these concerns only coming up after the event is already over? And at the center of it all, one question stands out. Is this just a delayed reaction? Or is there more to the situation that people are only now starting to understand? And this is where things start to feel different. Because when people think of Tina Knowles, they think of hair, styling, and fashion, areas where she has years of experience and a strong reputation built over time. She's been part of shaping iconic looks, building a visual identity, and working in spaces where people already trust her expertise. And because of that connection, especially being closely linked to Beyoncé, there's already a level of built-in trust. People don't always question things the same way. They show up expecting quality, expecting things to be done right, without really thinking twice about it. But this situation? This is something completely different. This isn't about fashion or image. This is about food, preparation, and safety standards behind the scenes. And that's not something people automatically associate with her experience. And that's exactly where the shift happens. Because once you step outside of what people know you for, expectations change. People start looking closer. They start asking different kinds of questions. And instead of just trusting the moment, they start wondering what's actually happening behind the scenes. And that's what makes everything that came next get a lot more attention. So let's look at what's being reported. According to Click2 Houston, health inspectors identified several issues that reportedly led to a temporary closure of Mama Tina's Gumbo operation. The report mentions multiple violations following a complaint about a customer illness, which is what initially brought attention to the situation. And while there were online reactions going back and forth, the official findings are what people are now focusing on. According to the report, inspectors found thawed seafood that had been labeled to remain frozen, along with food being stored in containers that raised concerns. It was also stated that the Gumbo had been moved to a freezer at an off-site location that was not licensed, and there were no temperature logs available to verify proper storage conditions. These details, reportedly obtained from the Houston Health Department, are now at the center of the conversation, leading many to ask more direct questions about how everything was handled behind the scenes. The complaint described a customer who said she ate the Gumbo earlier that day and later developed serious symptoms. These reportedly included vomiting, chills, nausea, and fever, which quickly raised concern around the situation. According to the same complaint, the customer also claimed she experienced severe symptoms afterward, which is what pushed the issue to be formally reported and reviewed. Following this, health department investigators responded to the pop-up setup connected to Beyoncé's mother and her family recipe on March 16th to look into what may have happened. What they reportedly found is where things become more detailed and concerning. Inspectors stated that the Gumbo had been prepared at an off-site location, where it was cooled and then placed into containers that were not considered food grade before being moved again. From there, records indicate the Gumbo was transferred to a freezer at a location that was not licensed, and there were no proper logs tracking temperatures during this process. After that, The frozen gumbo was reportedly transported to a refrigerated trailer at the rodeo, where it was left to thaw before being served to customers. Another key issue inspectors pointed out was the lack of temperature records entirely. There was no documentation showing how the food was cooled, stored, or maintained at safe levels throughout the process, which is a major part of food safety standards. Inspectors also reported observing frozen shrimp and crab labeled "Keep Frozen," but the items were no longer fully frozen at the time they were checked, which created an additional concern around handling seafood properly. Because of these combined issues, the report states that the food had to be discarded due to potential contamination risks. These included storage in non-food-grade containers, use of an unpermitted facility, and transporting food from a source that had not been approved. All of these details are now part of the larger conversation, as people continue asking how these steps were allowed to happen without being addressed earlier. And this is where the situation really starts to split. Because while some people are looking at the reports and taking it seriously, others are pushing back just as hard. Some are saying the reactions are being exaggerated, that social media is blowing things out of proportion, and that not every experience reflects what actually happened overall. At the same time, others are pointing to those same details and asking a different question. If concerns were raised, even in a small number of cases, does that mean something was missed early on? And how often do situations like this only come into focus after everything is already over? Because once that kind of doubt is introduced, it doesn't just go away. It stays part of the conversation. According to the report, there were several additional issues identified after the first day of the rodeo. One key point was that the food source being used was not properly listed on the approved permit application, which immediately raises compliance concerns. Inspectors also noted there was no documentation showing proper cooling temperatures or timing for the food, and no date markings were found for items that had been prepared in advance. On top of that, food that had been prepared more than 24 hours earlier and frozen was reportedly not being kept fully frozen, adding to the list of violations. Altogether, these findings added up to at least 6 separate violations. Based on what was documented during the inspection process, inspectors stated that they worked directly with the operators to explain corrective actions. This included proper rapid cooling methods, correct date marking procedures, and safe thawing practices to meet health standards. According to the report, the operators were cooperative during this process and asked questions about how to properly meet compliance requirements moving forward. They also stated that they would stop preparing food at off-site locations and instead focus on preparing everything on-site, pending approval of an updated permit. Records show that inspectors returned on Tuesday, March 17th to conduct a follow-up inspection before reopening. At that point, changes had already been made, including replacing a refrigerated trailer with a freezer trailer, and all stored food was reportedly kept fully frozen. Preparation methods were also adjusted, with gumbo being made fresh on-site each morning before serving, rather than being transported from another location. It was also confirmed that there would be no mixing of previously cooked and reheated food with freshly prepared batches, which is another important safety standard. Based on these corrections, Mama Tina's Gumbo was cleared to reopen later that same Tuesday afternoon. As of now, according to the Houston Health Department, it remains unclear whether any additional complaints or related illnesses have been reported. A request for comment was also sent to a representative for Mama Tina's Gumbo, though no public response has been confirmed at this time. Looking at the full situation, the main discussion now isn't just about what happened, but how quickly the issues were identified, addressed, and corrected, and whether the initial oversight could have been prevented altogether. And while many people did show up and support, there were also reports from individuals who said they experienced issues after eating the gumbo, which added another layer to the situation. At the same time, there were others online who pushed back on those claims, suggesting that some of the complaints weren't accurate, while others shared their own positive experiences, saying they had no problems at all and even described the food as enjoyable. Some people also mentioned meeting Mama Tina and described those interactions in a positive way, which created a mix of very different perspectives being shared at the same time. Because of that, the conversation quickly became divided, with one side questioning the complaints and the other pointing to official reports and personal experiences as reasons for concern. In at least one reported case, a complaint was taken seriously enough to involve the health department, with steps taken to investigate what may have caused the symptoms that were described. There were also additional reports from others describing similar reactions, which is what kept the discussion active and ongoing. All of this combined turned the situation into a much bigger conversation than it may have started as, with people trying to figure out what actually happened and which details matter most. But even with everything that's come out so far, a lot of people feel like the full picture still isn't completely clear, because while some are focused on the fact that actions were taken and corrections were made, others are still questioning how it got to that point in the first place. And that's where this story doesn't really end. Because once something like this gains attention, especially when it's connected to Beyoncé, it turns into a much bigger conversation about trust, expectations, and how quickly people believe something is good without asking questions. So now I've got to ask you, do you think people trusted this too quickly, just because it's connected to Beyoncé? Or do you think this would have played out the exact same way, no matter who was behind it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. And if you're into real breakdowns like this, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the next update on this situation.